Hello everyone and welcome to week 7 lesson 1, and this week for the first two lessons we're going to be focusing on principles, and we're going to be really looking at the word explain for this because this is the kind of question that usually gets asked with explain. So moving on. So when we're planning a PDP, you really have to follow some protocol when you're doing that, and typical protocol that you would consider are the principles of effective practice or the principles of training. Now, the principles of effective practice are for every factor, usually apart from a physical fitness factor. Okay, so the principles of training are only for fitness factors because you train fitness. You don't practice fitness, you train fitness. So the principles of training is not what we're talking about today. This is for every other PDP that we would use. So a skills practice, a mental practice, an emotional practice, or a social practice that we're doing. We would always consider the principles of effective practice as part of our protocol when planning a PDP. And that's why the wee arrow's going down to the developed stage of our cycle of analysis there. Next slide. So, what are the principles and what does that mean in the first place anyway? So, a principle is a fundamental truth or proposition that serves as the foundation for a system of belief or behaviour or a chain of reasoning. So it's building a foundation behind your PDP that you're creating. So that's really what we're talking about when we're saying principles. It's the foundation behind your performance development program planning. Okay? So one of the principles that we would consider, which I've just talked about for every factor apart from a physical fitness factor, are the principles of effective practice. So what's going to make your PDP effective? And these are remembered by saying GPMTW. Now, the way that we used to remember this was I used to live in Balfron and the GP's surgery was only open on a Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So your general practice is only open on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And the reason why we said that is obviously because general practice, it would take you to the principles of effective practice with a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Now that's obviously not what they stand for. So we'll go to the next slide and we'll break that down. So here they are, the principles of effective practice. The G stands for goal setting. So when you're planning your PDP, you should always use goal setting. Short, long-term goals, and they should be SMART. When you're planning a PDP, the next one that you have to consider is progression. Is your PDP gradually getting more demanding? Not quickly, gradually. So is it progressing in nice little small stages? The M stands for model performer, which is what one of the lessons we went over last week was. So you should always try to use a model performer at some point in your PDP. So performance should be compared to and based on model performers. A top performer could be investigated and copied, for example. The T stands for tedium. You should consider, are your practices exciting and challenging? Otherwise, you're going to get bored, which is another word for tedium. So when you're planning your PDP, you should be thinking to yourself, am I going to get bored of this? So you need to try and make it exciting and challenging. So maybe putting a challenge within that, maybe racing against somebody when you're doing it, trying to beat somebody, putting a number on it. And the last one is work to rest ratio. Bye, Mr. Miller. The last one is work to rest ratio. You should always consider your work to rest ratio. You do not want to be working too hard without any bits of rest. And that's for these mental practices, these emotional practices as well. You don't want to be doing them for too long. You must give yourself a rest. So these are the 5 things that you should be considering as part of your protocol when creating a PDP. Okay. But why? Why on earth should you consider these things? And that's really key that you know that, because the SQA exam papers will ask you why. Not only to describe how you use the principles, but they might ask you why did you use them in the first place. So that would have been your points if you were explaining them, what we just said, GPMTW. Here would be your explanation for it, so your third part of your explain answer. Ultimately, you're setting all these things because it's going to help you to improve, but that's too basic an answer for higher. So you don't want to say, I set goals because I would improve. You need to break it down a little bit more. So we try and help you to answer it because you might get a bit. So that's the way to remember it. So because you might get a bit. and that's either bored, injured, or fatigued. All of this would lead to a lack of improvement. I mean, you could do it the other way around and say that you were motivated, not injured, and not tired, but bit's quite a fun way to remember it. So if you don't get bored, injured, or fatigued, which means tired, this would all lead to improvement. But because you might get a bit if you don't do that, that means that you wouldn't improve. So these are the meanings behind it. Meaning I might get bored, meaning I might get injured, meaning I might get tired. And this would lead to a lack of improvement. You need to say that in your answer as well. So here's your model answer. This is how you'd use your PEE, your P chain, to help you explain why you've considered the principles of effective practice. Your point would be, just taking the first one, which is G, when planning a PDP, I would consider goal setting. Your example would be, so I would set short and long-term goals which were smarter. So that's just what you would do with that, and that's how you would use goal setting. But here's the why you would use goal setting. It's meaning I would not get bored, so that's part of your bit, as I was motivated by the targets, and this would help me to improve. And that's your 1 mark answer for that. So your task for today is on the next slide. Moving on. So this is your question time, and this is your task for today. So using the knowledge that you've gained from the rest of the lesson, obviously you can go back into the video and use that, is you're going to explain what you would consider when planning a training program. So we're going to use GPMTW, but I've already given you G for goal setting in the last slide. I'd like you to give me 4 PEE chains using PMTW. So progression, model performer, tedium, and work to rest ratio. So give me wee examples in there as well. You're going to have to think about that. How would you make it progressive? When did you use a model performer? How did you consider tedium at some point? And where have you used a work to rest ratio at all? Okay, so try and give that, put it on a piece of paper, keep it because you're going to need it for the end of the week. So don't not do this task, give it a go. Well done everybody. See you for the next lesson, which is on the principles of training.